When my elder sister got married, she repeatedly advised me to stay away from Chachi. Hearing my sister's words, I became troubled because in the house, Chachi was the only woman and she loved me very much. She did all my work. If I had stayed away from Chachi, then whom would I have entrusted with my work? This was because my sister, after getting married, had gone to her in-laws' house and I was feeling her absence very deeply. Later, after the marriage, my sister went abroad from Pakistan with her husband, and even when leaving, she kept emphasizing the same thing to me. Listening to my sister's words, I remained bewildered and troubled, not knowing exactly what the real issue was that my sister had with her, what kind of threat she posed. Even though Chachi used to speak very kindly with my sister and take care of her, my sister still remained somewhat distant towards her. I was very young when my mother passed away, and after that, my father and my sister took care of me. My sister never let me feel the absence of my mother. I had one uncle who lived with us. My uncle married by his own choice. Chachi was the sister of his friend, and my uncle fell head over heels for her at first sight. Then, seeing my uncle's consent, my father arranged their marriage on the spot. At first, my father reprimanded my uncle about it, saying, "I do not like these people. This girl is not worthy of you." But merely upon hearing this, my uncle became angry and said, "Nagina is a very good girl, and how can you speak about any girl like that without even examining her?" In my uncle's eyes, Nagina Chachi was already bound by the ties of love with Chachi. Then my father fell silent. After all, they knew that when love overwhelms a person, he understands nothing and does only what his heart desires. The same was happening with my uncle, and then, on the very next day when my sister went with my father to see Chachi, on the return, my sister's mood was very upset. She told me, "She is very beautiful in appearance, but very cunning, and to be honest, I do not like her at all." I do not know what my uncle saw in her. Despite the disapproval of my father and sister, my uncle married her, and when I saw her, I liked her very much because, firstly, she was very beautiful. Secondly, she was always impeccably punctual. And thirdly, she loved me very much. Now, 7 years had passed since my uncle's marriage. They had undergone extensive treatment, but even now, both of them were deprived of the blessing of children. I was the youngest in the house. At that time, I was 15 years old. Perhaps that is why, being the youngest, Chachi showed a great deal of love for me and often took me along into her room. At first, my sister did not object to this. Whenever I went to Chachi's side, my sister never asked me any questions about it, nor did she ever find it displeasing. But on that day, when I went into Chachi's room, she was lying on her bed. Chachi had wholeheartedly offered me that if I ever had any trouble with English or maths, then I should come to her. At that moment, since my sister was busy sewing the dowry clothes, she told me, "Go to Chachi and have her explain this question to you. I have a test tomorrow, and it is very important that you understand this question now." When I entered Chachi's room, she was half lying on the bed. She was wearing a black dress and her dupatta was not draped. When I went and sat by her, she got up from her place and then, bending over to make me work, the contours of her body became distinctly visible. Seeing this, I became terribly flustered and lowered my eyes. She, too, was looking at my face. Then she burst into hearty laughter and picked up her dupatta, wrapping it around her body. I found her behavior very strange, but then I dismissed it as a mere illusion. I thought that she considered me a child, and that is why she behaved so carelessly in front of me. But soon, such incidents started happening more frequently. Sometimes she would pinch my cheek, sometimes she would take me along on the bench, and sometimes she would sit with her hand resting on my shoulder. Seeing all this, I would become troubled. Whenever a blush appeared on my face, she would laugh and say, "What is the matter? Why are you so troubled?" Then I would silently shake my head in denial. Even if I wanted to, I could not tell her that her actions were exasperating me. I did not want her to take offense. And that day, it was afternoon, my sister was sleeping in her room. Today, she had a headache. When I went to ask her for food, she said, "I am not feeling well today, and today, Chachi made the food. You too, go there. Chachi will give you food." Hearing my sister's words, I hesitated and said to her, "I do not feel comfortable going there alone. Please come with me." For the past few days, Chachi's behavior had become even stranger. She began wearing a weird, immodest kind of dress, and in front of me, she did not even bother to cover herself. But because of shame, I could not tell my sister or anyone else about this. Now, when I told my sister, Come with me. I do not feel comfortable going alone. My sister was astonished by my words and said, What are you talking about? She loves you very much and takes such good care of you. Why are you saying such things? What could I possibly tell her? Considering that she was unwell, I did not think it appropriate to trouble her further. So I left the room and went to Chachi's side. At that time, Chachi was in her room. She had just come out of the bathroom after bathing, and she was wrapped in a towel. When I saw her in that state, I was stunned. I started to walk back, but she immediately stopped me and said, What is the matter? Where are you going? Wait, I will go and bring food for you. You must be hungry. Then, hesitantly, I sat outside in the lounge. I could no longer risk going into her room. After a short while, Chachi brought food and placed it near me. The food was very tasty, and then Chachi also sat with me. A subtle fragrance emanated from her body. All this seemed very strange to me, for until then, my sister had never appeared before me in such a state, nor had I ever seen any other woman behave in this manner. The way Chachi would nonchalantly come and sit before me, it was as if she had no sense of decorum. She neither felt any shame or modesty in front of me, nor did she care that I was growing up. I was not a little child who understood nothing. Chachi sat very close to me and then placed her hand on my shoulder, making little morsels with her hand and feeding me. All this seemed very strange to me. Seeing me hesitate in this way, she said, You look very good. That is why I feel like loving you. But I feel that you do not like me. You misunderstand me. I told Chachi, There is no such thing. Why should I dislike you? Yet all this seemed rather odd to me. Then hesitantly, I decided to have a word or two with Chachi. She sat very close to me and said, What is it that seems strange? Tell me. Now her face was so near to mine that I felt a strange fear. I closed my eyes when I heard my sister's voice. What is happening? Look at her. My sister, upon seeing her there, was stunned. She was looking at Chachi from head to toe with bewildered eyes. At that moment, Chachi was semi-nude. Seeing my sister, she tried to cover her body and said, I had just come out of the washroom and Zane was hungry, so I thought I would feed him first and then change my clothes. My sister glared at Chachi angrily. Then Chachi got up and left. After a short while, when she came out again, she was wearing decent clothes and had draped a large dupatta over her shoulders. But now, Chachi's expressions looked very different. There was a trace of fear in her eyes. For as long as I continued eating there, my sister remained seated beside me, even though she had a headache and had earlier told me that she wanted to have a proper sleep. But now, when I saw her sitting here, I began to feel a sense of relief in my heart. When we all returned to our portions, my sister took me into her room, grabbed my arm, and said, How long has all this been going on? Hearing my sister's words, I was dumbfounded. She asked, What are you talking about? What is going on between you and Chachi? Hearing my sister's words, I became distressed and began to cry, saying, There is nothing of that sort. I have done nothing wrong with anyone. And I hold Chachi in very high regard. She herself comes and sits beside me. I have told her many times not to come in such clothes in front of me, but she does not listen to me. After that, my sister forbade me from going to Chachi's side. Even if I ever went there, my sister would accompany me. Now she would not leave me alone with Chachi, even for a moment. Chachi's demeanor had also changed often. She would always remain covered in a large dupatta, yet still she loved me very much. Whatever good things she made, she would bring them to me. One day, when my sister had gone to the market, Chachi came to me, sat down, and while stroking my hair said, I have always loved you as if you were my own child. I was so unreserved with you, but I do not know why your sister misunderstands me. Saying this, tears welled up in her eyes, and after a short while, she left. I kept thinking that there had been a misunderstanding between my sister and me. How could Chachi think wrongly about me? I was much younger than her, and she had married the man chosen by my uncle. And why would she need to deceive my uncle, especially for that boy who was much younger than her? Aunt used to take very great care of me. She would often bring gifts for me and prepare the most delightful, tasty foods especially for me. Every time I saw her bringing these little tokens of affection or the scrumptious meals she had made, sister would become angry. Yet despite that anger, she would put on a smile and remain silently resigned. After that incident, they never spoke with Aunt about the matter, nor did they ever mention it to Dad or to Uncle. Instead, sister began to harbor a quiet suspicion deep in her heart regarding aunt's intentions. And on many occasions, she would tell me, over and over again, that from that day onward, I should not be seen even in the vicinity of aunt. I, however, was filled with astonishment at this and would often think to myself that perhaps my dear sister and I had misunderstood the situation completely, for aunt was not at all the sort of person they described. In those same days, sister's father had arranged a marriage proposal at one place. The match was for a man who happened to be the son of one of Dad's very close friends. When I first met Ryan Bai, I found him to be extremely likable. He possessed the same gentle temperament and pleasant nature as sister herself. I thought that if sister were to marry him, she would indeed be very happy with him. I remember clearly the moment when I praised Ryan Bai in front of sister. She smiled in a way that conveyed satisfaction and then said, "If he has taken a liking to you, that must mean he is truly a very good man." At that time, the entire family was in a hurry to settle marriage matters. Soon after my matriculation examinations were completed, the date for sister's wedding was fixed. Sister was overjoyed at the prospect of her upcoming marriage. Yet, along with her happiness, she was also troubled by concerns about me. She repeatedly stressed that Dad would make proper arrangements for a servant in the house and instructed that for any work required, I should simply instruct the servant. According to her, I would no longer need to go to Aunt's portion for help. She warned me, "You do not know that if even the slightest misstep occurs and Uncle finds out, a huge uproar will break out in the house. The relationship between Dad and Uncle will be ruined, and all those relatives who always set examples for others will laugh at us." Hearing these words from sister left me bewildered, but I refrained from saying anything further that might aggravate her anger. Instead, I promised her in my heart and out loud that I would do exactly as she had instructed. After sister's wedding, Dad ensured that a servant was arranged for the household. This domestic servant would remain in the house from early morning until late in the evening. During that time, she took care of every aspect of the household work. She cleaned, prepared all the meals, and managed the entire routine of the home. Once Dad returned in the evening, she would leave the premises. This woman, though of advanced age, was known for her excellent manners and calm, dignified behavior. She kept herself strictly occupied with her own tasks and always maintained a poised, composed manner in everything she did. Yet, for reasons I could not fathom, Aunt did not get along with her at all. It was as if there was an inexplicable hostility in Aunt's demeanor toward her, and I never understood why Aunt felt such animosity. In the following period, Aunt began taking even more meticulous care of me. Almost every evening, as the sun dipped low and the shadows grew long, Aunt would come into my room and gently say, "You have become so frail and weak. I worry about you terribly after having been so delicate you are now left alone. Please come to me so we can spend some time together. We will play a game of Ludo, chat amiably, and even watch television together until you forget the passage of time. Until your studies commence, you must learn to enjoy the pleasures of life." Aunt was always so kind and caring toward me. I truly cherished the way she remembered even my smallest likes and preferences. I recall that on one particular evening, she had even brought me a glass of freshly prepared carrot halwa, a dessert that I adored. I used to ask sister on special occasions to have carrot halwa made just for me. Not long after this pleasant memory, the servant entered my room. On entering, she began to look at Aunt with a very strange and probing stare, as if she were judging her silently. After a moment, the servant sat down in the same room. Witnessing this, Aunt's face immediately registered an expression of disgust and disapproval. She spoke sharply to the servant, saying, "In this household, you have been employed solely for carrying out the daily chores. Have you finished all of your tasks already? Because you are sitting here in the room as if you have no more work to do." Hearing Aunt's rebuke, I felt a discomfort rising within me as well. I looked at the servant and saw that a shadow of sadness or perhaps irritation had passed over her face. She replied, "I have already finished all of the household work. I only came here just now to ask the little master what he would like to eat, so that I could prepare his meal accordingly." At that moment, Aunt added, "Today I have prepared his favorite meal, therefore he will eat from my portion. Do not trouble yourself about him." For some unknown reason, Aunt's attitude toward this servant would always become exceptionally cold and distant. Then, when I went over to collect food from Aunt's designated portion, I was overcome by a strange, unsettling feeling. Unable to bear it any longer, I immediately fled from that part of the house. Every single night, without fail, Aunt would bring me a glass of milk before bedtime. Until I had finished that glass, she would sit in front of me and gaze upon me with eyes that held an odd, almost sweet intensity. I have always disliked drinking milk. Ever since I was a child, I would struggle to finish even one glass, partly out of fear of inciting the wrath of dad and sister. And yet, even though I did not like the taste of milk, the constant caring insistence of Aunt, who brought it to me every day, eventually won me over. I began to drink the milk simply in order to keep her affection and favor. However, as time passed and I started to feel an increasing irritation inside, I finally mustered the courage to say, "Why do you trouble me with these daily rituals? If I need anything, I will go to the kitchen and get it for myself." My tone, though unintentional, had turned rather curt that day, a change that was spurred by the fact that Aunt had dressed in a very unusual and perplexing manner. It appeared that she was still in her nightdress, a garment meant only for sleep, and yet she had risen and come into my room. That day, Uncle had been away on business, out of town, and perhaps because of his absence, Aunt was present in my room much later than usual. Seeing her there, dressed in such a way and at such an hour, left me confused and overwhelmed. My mind was a jumble of emotions, and controlling my own feelings was becoming almost impossible. Just then, Dad entered the room and asked me in a tone filled with mild reproach, "What is the matter? Haven't you slept yet?" His eyes, searching the room, soon fell upon Aunt. With a puzzled and somewhat stern look, he inquired, "What are you doing here at this hour?" At the sight of Dad, Aunt became visibly flustered. She quickly started trying to adjust and fix her dress, though it was evident that the garment was insufficient in covering her body properly. Overwhelmed by panic, she began to make her way out of the room as quickly as possible. However, before she could fully depart, Dad admonished her sharply, saying, "In a young man's room at night, wearing such attire is absolutely unacceptable. Has your husband ever warned you about this kind of behavior? Do not let him see you like this. I will speak to him about it." Hearing these words, Aunt became terrified and stammered, "Today, I swear I will never act so carelessly again. Please do not tell my husband anything about what you have seen." With those words, the situation seemed to be momentarily settled. Yet I found Aunt's behavior utterly peculiar and confusing. Every time she looked at me with her deep, penetrating eyes, and when those eyes met mine, I felt as if a bolt of lightning were coursing through my body. It was as though her gaze awakened emotions within me that I had long suppressed, making it extremely difficult to keep my feelings in check. That very day, the weather outside was dark and gloomy. The skies were filled with heavy, brooding clouds that seemed to promise a storm at any moment. At the suggestion of one of my friends, I had even watched a newly released movie, a film that was remarkably romantic in nature. The movie was replete with emotionally charged scenes that stirred something deep within me, igniting feelings that were both unfamiliar and intense. In that moment, I felt strongly that I too had grown into a young man and that my inner emotions were beginning to flare up in a way that was impossible to ignore. Yet, despite these strong emotions, I knew deep down that I was still too young for such matters. Neither was it possible for Dad to arrange my marriage at this time, nor was it acceptable for me to become entangled in a romantic liaison with any girl. I was painfully aware that if Dad were ever to learn of these feelings and actions, he would become exceedingly angry, and I could never bear to see him so upset. Just as my internal struggle was reaching its peak and I found it nearly impossible to control the torrent of emotions surging within me, I suddenly heard a knock at the door. I had taken care to lock the door from the inside, ensuring that no one would enter while I was engrossed in my movie. My mind was filled with anxiety, worrying that if Dad happened to come in unexpectedly and saw me watching the movie, he would be furious. Yet, at that very moment, I did not know who could be knocking. Gathering my courage, I went to open the door. To my shock and dismay, standing outside was none other than Aunt. Even now, she was dressed in a black nightie that accentuated her delicate features, and she possessed an almost otherworldly beauty that took my breath away. The sight of her left me completely stunned and disoriented. I managed to stammer out, "What are you doing here?" Almost immediately, she pushed me from behind and stepped into my room. Without any further hesitation, she moved to the bed and sat down as though inviting me to join her. Everything that was happening in that moment seemed utterly unbelievable. I found myself exclaiming to Aunt, "What are you saying? What kind of behavior is this?" It was then that I realized with painful clarity that my sister's suspicions about Aunt were, in fact, well founded. My sister had correctly understood Aunt's true nature all along. It became starkly evident to me that Aunt was indeed a depraved woman, a woman who, in the absence of Uncle, was engaging in behavior tantamount to infidelity. Yet, despite this realization, I found within myself a steadfast determination not to commit such a sin. I pleaded with Aunt, saying, "Please, you must leave this room immediately. If anyone happens to see you here, the consequences will be dire." However, Aunt was not inclined to listen. Instead, she began forcing herself upon me. I tried over and over to push her away, repeatedly telling her, "Don't do this. It is wrong. Please stop this behavior." At that very moment, as I was struggling to fend her off, both Dad and Uncle entered the room. The sudden appearance of these two figures left me in a state of utter shock and disbelief. Simultaneously, I noticed that Aunt's face had turned an ashen shade of pale. With a stern and accusing tone, Dad declared, "Today, you have seen with your very own eyes the reprehensible deeds of your wife. For many years, I have silently noted your behavior, how you have been trying to lead my innocent child astray. I had warned you from the start that you were not a good woman, yet you never listened to me even once. Now, look at what you have done and see the consequences with your own eyes." When I heard these severe words coming from Dad's mouth, Aunt broke down in tears. In a trembling voice, she pleaded, "Please forgive me. I have made a grave mistake. I promise on my life that I will never act in such a manner again." However, before any further words could be exchanged, Uncle struck Aunt with a resounding, forceful slap across her face. After delivering that harsh blow, Uncle took her by the arm and led her out of the room without any further delay. The very next day, the matter was resolved with finality. They expelled Aunt from the house altogether, and Uncle proceeded to divorce her. Uncle declared firmly that there was no justification for keeping a woman like her, a woman who, in his absence, could not uphold the dignity of our family and was even attempting to forge an illicit relationship with my own nephew, a man who was scarcely more than half her age. This act of betrayal and misconduct was simply unacceptable. In the days that followed, Uncle was visibly sorrowful over what had transpired. Meanwhile, Dad continuously prodded him to consider remarriage, reminding him that life must go on. Eventually, Uncle did remarry, a woman of his own age. This new wife was a widow and had a young daughter, only 1 or 2 years old. In a gesture of compassion, Uncle not only welcomed the young daughter into his care, but also embraced her as part of his new family by marrying her. 2 years after their wedding, Allah blessed Uncle with the gift of a son. From that point on, everything in the household seemed to settle into a state of happiness. Uncle's new wife was very kind and quickly became well integrated with everyone around her. The perpetual reminder of Aunt, whose presence and misdeeds had long hung over my head like a sharp, unsheathed sword, had finally been erased from our lives. In time, even Sister, who had once harbored so many anxieties about me, became fully satisfied and reassured about my well-being, her every concern gradually dissipating away.